Tonight, the IRA claims responsibility for a bombing in London and a special report on President Sadat's funeral. Irish Republican sources in Belfast say more bomb attacks can be expected in Britain following a blast in London which killed one woman and injured another 40 people. The IRA claimed responsibility for the bomb which exploded near an army barracks in Chelsea.
The white bus carrying the guardsmen makes its journey every day, and there's no doubt it was the target for the van carrying explosives, which had been moved into position about half an hour before. It had apparently broken down and been pushed into place with the help of a passerby, just where the guardsman's coach would slow down at a pedestrian crossing. The precision with which the bomb went off suggests that some form of remote control triggered the explosive. The coach was riddled with nails and coach bolts which had been packed into the bomb. Passers-by were also sprayed with them. 6 inches long, they make lethal weapons. Some were fired 50 yards or more. 50 people needed to be treated. A score of guardsmen were among them. A pregnant woman had a nail passed between her toes but was unharmed. She'd been talking to an elderly woman who was killed. Most serious injuries were among the soldiers. 3 teams of surgeons worked for hours trying to save lives, limbs and eyes. They were drawing out nails 9 inches long. Most civilian injuries were caused by flying glass around the big explosion.
Egypt's president-elect, Mr. Mubarak, has accepted invitations to visit France, West Germany, Italy and the United States. The invitations came during Mr. Mubarak's talks with leaders of various nations after the funeral of President Sadat. The ABC's Russ Morgan said there was only one incident during the funeral. It occurred when police fired shots into the air to break up a group of about 1,000 demonstrators. But Russ Morgan reports this was well away from the ceremony.
The state funeral for President Sadat began with prayers at the Mahdi military hospital, where the mortally wounded president was taken immediately after the shooting last Tuesday. The coffin was then flown by army helicopter to a major sports ground in Cairo, and then there were solemn observances here at the military parade ground where Mr. Sadat was assassinated. Representatives of governments around the world came to pay a final tribute to the man who was best known as a Middle East peacemaker. The man who was sitting beside Mr. Sadat when he was assassinated and is now about to take his place as president, Mr. Hosni Mubarak, led the official Egyptian mourning party. Security was tight throughout, with soldiers ready to quash any sign of a demonstration by fundamentalist Muslim groups who've been linked with the assassination of the president and with violent uprisings in at least one regional town. Past and present world figures involved in Middle East peace initiatives, including 3 former American presidents, were among the mourners. The Australian government was represented by the Deputy Prime Minister, Mr. Anthony. So the final tributes have now been paid to President Anwar Sadat, the peacemaker. But there now remains a deep mood of uncertainty over the future of Egypt and the whole of the Middle East. This is Russ Morgan in Cairo for ABC News.
South Australia's new governor was announced by the Queen at Government House in Adelaide tonight. He's Lieutenant General Sir Donald Beaumont Dunstan, aged 58, who will succeed Mr. Keith Seaman, probably in April. General Dunstan, KBE, CB, has been Chief of General Staff of the Australian Army since 1977. He was born at Murray Bridge, a South Australian country town, and graduated from the Royal Military College Duntroon in mid-1942, aged 19. South Australia's Premier Mr. Tonkin says General Dunstan is a distinguished son of South Australia who's shown outstanding leadership qualities. The Australian Democrat spokesman on Veterans Affairs, Senator Macklin, says federal cabinet is applying pressure to block the claims of Vietnam and Japan veterans seeking compensation for radiation and Agent Orange poisoning. Speaking at a meeting of the Nuclear Veterans Association in Brisbane, Senator Macklin said it was clear Cabinet was overriding the views of the Minister for Veteran Affairs, Senator Messner. Later, he expanded on his claims of official obstruction to Megan Dixon-Child.
Well, it's certainly within the Cabinet at a higher seniority level to the Minister himself. I find the Minister a compassionate type of person, but he doesn't seem to be able to get very much done and constantly seems to be giving answers in the Senate which really contradict his own personal stand when one talks to him on an individual basis. So I think the Minister is having a great deal of trouble convincing other people within the Cabinet of the legitimacy and correctness of the claims being made by the veterans.
Why is Cabinet so terrified of these claims then?
I have no idea, and that's the problem. it's not winning them any votes or any friends. It's hurting the veterans. It's hurting our whole defence effort. It doesn't do any good for anybody, and it's certainly not what the community expect our government to be doing for veterans.
The veterans of the Japanese invasion have received a fairly poor reception. Is there obstruction there as well?
Yes, well, there's some really incredible things there, of course. We have now a statement from the government itself which says there wasn't anybody in there in 45. And in this meeting itself of the nuclear veterans, there are a number of people there who were there before 45 and have documentary proof. You know, this is the extraordinary position that the government and the department are taking.
And you see this as a sort of cover-up?
Well, I don't know what they're covering up. That's the problem. You know, so I wouldn't say it's a cover. It's just really part of the whole shameful treatment that veterans have had, not only the nuclear and the Vietnam veterans, but the victims of mustard gas during the Second World War and the Korean veterans. Right the way across the board, there seems to be a great reluctance for the department to stop acting as though it were a tax department looking after the public purse and start acting in the interest of the veterans. That's what it was set up for.
In tennis, the Mazda Super Challenge in Melbourne was won today by American Gene Mayer. He took the match in straight sets against fellow American Elliot Telcher, 7-5, 6-1, 7-6, and the tie-break went to 9-7. ABC sporting commentator Bob Vincent with the last moments of the match.
Elliot Telcher had defeated the world's #1 player John McEnroe in straight sets in the semi-final for the right to meet Gene Mayer, and that match began to tell on the young American. The first set was a struggle, 7-5, but Mayer breezed through the second set, 6-1. Games were level in the final set until the fourth game, and then a break by each player levelled the games at 6 each. Telcher set the early pace in the tie-break with scorching backhand passing shots, but Mayer's disguise on both the forehand and the backhand repeatedly had Telcher guessing. Repeating the final score, Gene Mayer defeating Elliot Telcher in straight sets, 7-5, 6-1, 7-6.
In the West German capital, Bonn, about 250,000 people have taken part in an anti-nuclear rally. News agencies say it was the biggest protest in West Germany since World War II.
Crossing the River Rhine, one of 5 separate columns which poured into Bonn this morning in what Chancellor Helmut Schmidt had called a declaration of war against his government. But West Germany's biggest ever anti-nuclear march was predominantly calm and well-ordered, resembling more the peace rallies of the late 60s. Contingents of mostly young people came by bus and train from all over Western Europe, including Britain. And among the marchers, an estimated 60,000 members of Chancellor Schmidt's own Social Democratic Party, ignoring appeals to boycott the demonstration. The organisers had made a major effort to avoid violent confrontation, anxious not to diminish their principal message to the German government, which was renounce cruise and Pershing missiles and support a nuclear-free Europe. With shops and businesses closed and traffic almost at a standstill in Bonn, the university was taken over by thousands of demonstrators, later to be addressed by speakers from several parts of the world. Today's gathering is intended as a lead to the peace movement in other European capitals, with the pressure being built up on the NATO countries to pull out of the nuclear rearmament deal with the United States.
And that's the end of this mid-evening news bulletin. And now on ABC television and FM stereo radio, we return to the second act of HMS Pinafore.